Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piss. Ukraine war, I guess breaking news update concerning the election in Georgia. So just to give you the context, Georgia is going through its general elections today. Today's election in Georgia, says Anton Gerashchenko, isn't just a vote, it's a crossroads. Will Georgia move closer to the EU or deepen ties with Russia? Remember, there are protests recently after the Foreign Agents Registration Act equivalent, but a Russified version of a Foreign Agents Act that we see it elsewhere, and so far in the US is a decent act to stop interference in the US. But the Foreign Agents law that we have seen, first of all, enacted in Russia and then pushed to places like Hungary, and I think even Slovakia might have a version, Serbia, but they tried to push that in Georgia. And it created all these protests, massive pushback, because the Georgian Dream Party has moved away from EU accession towards Russia, even though they were voted in on a mandate of acceding to the EU. They've taken Georgia in the Russian direction, and there are all these massive protests that cause some pushback from the Georgians, hiring some Russian thugs as well to come in and smack people about. Those protests didn't manage, because basically Georgian Dream have a majority in the parliament. It didn't manage to change anything, although it did give us an insight into a relatively small country in terms of population having quite a lot of people there who really would rather the country goes in the direction of the EU. That law was enacted because it got pushed through parliament. It got vetoed by the president, who is not a fan of Georgian Dream. She's not a member of that party. But then the president's veto doesn't really go very far, and it just gets re-put through. And it got through parliament, and so they got that law enacted. But we were under the impression, correctly, that this election that was looming after that law was passed was going to be huge. This was going to be a crossroads for Georgia. And it's going. I was saying, look, it's very clear that the only way that Georgian Dream are going to be able to deal with this rising sentiment of anti-Georgian Dream, anti-Russia, is going to be through rigging the election. So either this election is free and fair and we see a rejection of the Georgian Dream, or they're going to rig the election. And what we are seeing at the moment today is that they are rigging the election, and it's incredibly sad to see this. Now, as Anton Gerashchenko says, Georgian Dream, the current ruling party, is a party of contradictions. They led Georgia towards finally receiving EU candidate status in 2023, and their campaign promises to include EU membership, yet they also espouse typical Kremlin narratives. The party's founder, oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, who stepped away from party leadership when he became a Russian citizen, yet still actively participates in political life, alluded the opposition were Western puppets and said they'll bring war and ruin to Georgia. He has this massive mansion type thing, modern mansion on the hills, I think, overlooking Tbilisi. But he is like a billionaire, I think, or certainly a very rich person behind Georgian Dream and behind the Russian move towards. Behind Georgian Dream and the Georgian move towards Russification, towards Russian influence. But as Anton Gerashchenko continues, the Russian influence is evident not only in the words but also in the actions of the ruling party, signalling what's to come if they get re-elected. So this year, Georgian Dream cracked down on civil society and independent media by introducing the controversial Foreign Agents Bill, modelled after similar legislation in Russia. Despite widespread protests, the bill was signed into law. We can already see the results in the electoral campaign. The last few months were marked by reports of illegal searches of the offices of several media outlets and the homes of journalists and civil society activists by the Georgian security services. Appealing to older, more conservative parts of Georgia, the current government also decided to follow the Kremlin's lead and ban, quote, LGBT propaganda. This legislative initiative caused outrage among liberal Georgians and the country's European partners. Because of these two laws, the EU froze the accession process with Georgia. There's strong resistance to these laws from Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili. Pro-European parties and ordinary Georgians. Quote, Georgian Dream has the chances to win the majority of the vote, but thanks to a new electoral law, any party that reaches 5% will get seats in the parliament. And the opposition has already discussed forming a broad coalition to oppose the pro-Russian course. However, much like we have seen in Moldova last week, Moscow is willing to expand enormous resources to make Georgia subservient to Russia. Whether the Kremlin is using its typical false flag tactic to cause disturbances, influence people's voting decisions, to prepare the grounds for provocations in the case of the unlikely loss of Georgian dream. One thing is clear. They want to use the election day to the fullest to bring Tbilisi closer to Moscow. So there was a huge protest the other day, given that the elections were looming, not so much a protest, but a pro-EU gathering, march, and huge numbers of people in Tbilisi. And there was one video I shared with you of some of these hired goons, these sort of hired muscle, that were found in some restaurant waiting to go and do their thing. And it's just Russian muscle, overtly symbolizing the influence of Russia on the election. Whether the Kremlin is using its typical... yes. So I've said that. But yeah, it's these false flag tactics. Whether the Kremlin uses typical false flag tactic to cause disturbances, influence people's voting decisions, or prepare the grounds for provocations in the case of the unlikely loss of Georgian dream. One thing is clear. They want to use election day to the fullest to bring Tbilisi close to Moscow, as I've said. But it's these points of disturbances, influences on people's decisions, voting decisions, that we're going to look at in a second once I finish this. So observing this election for the past several weeks, we have seen Georgian dream use Ukraine as a cautionary tale for its voters, trying to cultivate an image of the party of peace. For them, peace means rapprochement with Russia, even if it comes at the cost of Georgia's European aspirations. We in Ukraine know very well that where there is Russia, there is no peace, only war and suffering. Many Georgians are very well aware of this too. The 2008 Russian invasion is still fresh in the minds of many who still cast their votes today. We stand with free Georgia. Now, there are these videos I'm going to now show you, and there will be a bit of a trigger warning for these videos that will show some violence taking place. So Georgia holding their elections today, it is crucial that they go in the right direction. And already we knew it was going to be problematic. There was a journalist that was held up at the airport and was not allowed entry into Georgia, who was going to be covering the elections. I mentioned that recently. Stephen Goss here says, Stefan Goss, I tried to enter Georgia, the country, not the state, to photograph the election. I'm an IFJ Global accredited journalist. On arrival, my passport had clearly been flagged. They took it. I waited for 1.5 hours, then got paperwork saying I was denied entry and was being deported. That's 2 journalists I know of, at least, that has happened to. We are seeing here, it says, more epic level election fraud by Russian-backed regime in Georgia, as voters registered under the Kremlin-backed Georgian Dream Party are given 2 ballots. There you go. Absolutely. I mean, straight away, that's ridiculous. So 2-1 voting, as is being evidenced here in this. So there you go. 2 ballots. Thank you very much. Videoing this gets given that. Job's a good one. Thank you. Then we have this. This is a video that is doing the rounds a lot, was doing rounds early doors. This is someone stuffing like multiple ballots. Look, one guy, all those ballots. I mean, this is on video. So he stuffed them in. The other guy there then pushes them all the way in. Then does that invalidate that whole box? What happens here? These are the election observers in green. Obviously, either not wanting to do anything about it or unable to do anything about that. That video just freaks me out. It makes me so sad. It makes me so angry. This is just obvious election interference. This election should just be called null and void straight away already. And things need to be put in place to secure that it is a free and fair election. That a polling station, I presume it's the same one, has been closed in southern Georgia during election following reported ballot stuffing. Footage surfaced earlier today of an individual stuffing the ballot box at a polling station in the southern Georgian city of Manueli. And then here finally we have evidence of a carousel with ID cards in Manueli, same sort of place. Emin Karimov attempts to vote with the passport of Mitzi Darsalia, brother of the ruling Georgian Dream MP. We've been receiving reports of systemic manipulations with ID cards throughout the last weeks from all regions. Absolutely incredible. And so it goes on. Here we have an 18-year-old girl, an election observer, attacked by a government-affiliated criminal. This is true. This is a true face of Russian a-holes in my government, says General George Feller. They need to go. So here we have someone who is observing and filming, having being attacked. And there you go. That's another example of the sort of activity. And then we have something far more sort of overt, a couple of bits of footage here. This is what Russians are paying to do to Georgians that aren't happy with Russia taking over their government. What are Russians paying to do to Americans that resist Russia's takeover of the US government? Interesting sort of parallels being evoked there.
Hazırda Gürcü arzusu ile Vahid Milliyetçi Partisi üzvlərinin arasında qarşı durma başlayır.
As tensions run high, and here's another example of TV Pivelli showing footage of government-affiliated criminals attacking the election observers. Observers are heroes, this person says. Let's go back to the beginning. Sound only out of one ear. Just, it breaks my heart. Like, this is what we're up against to get freedom and democracy in the world. It's just absolutely does my nut in. That ballot stuffing just makes me so angry. Just, there's something visceral about that. About my reaction to that. It really does me in. That little clip there just does me in. Clip of the day: Georgia's election, the Georgian Dream. Entities shoving a big handful of ballots into a ballot box, irregularities, open fraud all over the place, as well as violence and intimidation by pro-government actors, says Neil Hauer. Good commentary here by Hans Gutbrod, who is one of the best on Georgia, on what to expect and Georgia Dream's likely calculus today. Pretty much says it all, that hours before voting is even done, one of the top Georgian Dream officials has announced that his party will win with 60%, a number Georgian Dream never even received when they had some genuine popularity. Just unbelievable. Anyway, let's look into what this chap seems to think will happen. So here's one theory I have of what is happening. BI believes in the 60% for I think he's the Prime Minister, believes in the 60% for Georgian Dream or close enough, as he struggles to understand how anyone sensible could oppose him. That is definitely a pattern with him. Number two, no one has the courage to tell him it's not quite where things are. If you were that kind of person, you are no longer in the inner circle, and probably not in Georgian Dream either. Georgian Dream totally overestimated in the first round of 2018. Also, it had a cold shower. I originally expected they would not make that mistake again, but many believe that Georgian Dream don't have consolidated campaign management this time. Number three, Georgian Dream people managing the election, always at the municipal level and usually with significant autonomy, are struggling to keep up with 55% plus expectations. Several of them pulling all the stops, fearing that they and the families will be fired, which explains some of the stupid stuff we are seeing. However, extreme stuffing can get a station cancelled that votes pro-opposition parties. There's a track record of this. In other words, if you that ballot stuffing situation happened, arguably, so I'm not saying this was the case, but it could be that was a polling station that was famously anti-Georgian Dream. Like, you had opposition parties do well in that area, so that's a place that you go and overtly stuff ballots in. Then they close it down, they stop the count, they say that counts, we're not including any of these, and then that stuffing incident invalidates all the pro-opposition votes. So that could have been what happened there. Number 4, there may be a crunch time inside Georgian Dream tonight if they indeed fall significantly short and did not fully prepare for this. Number 5, that does not guarantee a happy outcome, as Georgian Dream might take rash and unconsidered actions also. The only option here, there are 2 options. One, Georgian Dream lose and do it in a fair and square election, or there's violence. There's protests and they quash any protests violently. One or the other. And it's not looking like the first option, that there's been ballot stuffing and fraud and violence already at the electoral polling stations, means that it's far more likely that we are going down the latter course of actions. Number 5, so anyway, that's the end of number 5. I said that. I do not think it's all secured for opposition parties gaining a majority in parliament. There is a chunk of genuine Georgian Dream support and nepotism. Gakaria not making 5% remains a risk. I don't know what party that is, but it feels distinctly possible. Caveat, I may well be wrong about all of this. It's just something to watch for today. It is such a shame that we are seeing people who are hell-bent on stopping there being free and fair elections. It is just heartbreaking that this is happening, and that Russia are behind it, and Russia are behind all that it appears to be wrong in the region, in my opinion. As if 2008 wasn't bad enough, getting invaded by Russia. Now they're being, electorally invaded, manipulated, and there's just all this nefarious influence from Russia, from the Kremlin. Anyway, let's just hope that the Georgians are empowered to make the right decisions, and that those decisions are reflected in the outcomes of the election. I have my doubts, and I think it's going to be a very rocky couple of weeks for the Georgians, that's for sure. Anyway, I thought that was important to talk about on its own. Thank you for listening. Take care, and please check out the fundraiser we are doing here for the 2 trucks for the 12th National Guards unit. We're up to 31,725 euros. That's amazing. We need to get to 38,000. It's going to be a difficult final part of that journey to get those last euros in. So if you can help in any small or even large way, or even by sort of sharing and spreading the news, please do so, and we can help these units, this unit, get the vehicles that they so desperately need. Anyway, thanks for listening. Take care. Speak soon.